The podcast which you are about to listen to is an account of the tragedy which befell two friends talking shit about albums on the internet, Nick and Mike. It is all the more tragic in that they had better albums to be listening to, but had they spun As the Palaces Burn, Shogun, or Blackwater Park, they could not have expected nor they would have wished to have listened to as much of a mad and macabre as they were listened to that day. For them, a podcast series on a corny 90s nu metal band became a nightmare. The events of that day were led to the discovery of arguably the worst album to hit number 3 on the Billboard charts. You wanted the worst, you got the worst. This is Results May Vary.
Limp Bizkit play their intro theme and go straight into their first song, Hot Dog, as the crowd erupts in a wild frenzy. Do you know what's great about today? This is Limp Bizkit's last Big Day Out show, and we get to rock it with you in Sydney. Phone calls reveal that Limp Bizkit have cancelled the rest of the tour, and one girl is in Concord Hospital in a critical situation.
Bizkit was shell-shocked.
Losing an integral member like a lead guitarist.
Portland left his Bizkit bandmates in mid-October.
We are here on the 14th stop of the 22-city Put Your Guitar Where Your Mouth Is nationwide search for a replacement to West Borland.
If you're anybody who's doing something that they don't want to do, bells start going off. Like, I'm actually selling out.
If I could do it with Wes, I could do it without him.
Because she talked today, Kristen. Why she talk about me on TV today? Now what we're going to do is we're going to leak Just Drop Dead on the internet today.
Who wants a pinata Fred Durst?
We're at a press conference, Metallica, Linkin Park, announcing the tour.
I knew the guitar player thing was a big deal, so I had my manager Peter call up Mike Smith, a guy we jammed with early on, to give him another shot.
I held them back from being their best, and because I was so against a lot of the things that were going on. There just came a point where I was not really interested in what was going on anymore, and it was not where my heart was.
Limp Bizkit's here without Wes. What the
The song is about coming back and being gone for a while and feeling personally that a lot of music that has been inspired by Limp Bizkit has ruined music.
I think that they'll be better because I'm gone.
Limp Bizkit sucks cock!
And we're back. This is the series finale of the rise and squall of Limp Bizkit, a mini-series on Renegade Jukebox on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. With me is my co-host, Nick.
Man, I gotta say, this has probably been one of the funnest series that we got to work on. I mean, we've only really done Machine Head and the All That Remains mini-sode that we did, but honestly, this has been a blast kind of just going back to the late 90s and early 2000s for a couple of months.
Yeah, I agree. This has been, for better or for worse, a memorable experience. Now, we will get into Results May Vary, but as alluded to in our intro, there's some history behind us. So Nick, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, absolutely. So this is kind of a big dead giveaway. I don't really feel like we're spoiling anything by saying that this is a terrible album, because this is a famously bad album. This kind of belongs up in the conversation of albums so bad that it tanked careers. So I really don't feel like we're saying anything new in that regard. But there's reasons as to why it was bad. So with that in mind, we got to go back to the beginning of 2001. Now, I kind of brought this up when we were doing our train wreck episode, but I was telling you in that episode, Mike, do you remember a festival in Australia called Big Day Out?
Oh, yeah. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but doing the research for this podcast, that name came up quite a bit.
Yeah, so I bring that up in mind due to the fact that this was one of Limp Bizkit's, biggest shows at this point, and for better or for worse, kind of was a telling sign of how the band would proceed moving forward. So I say that because I sent you a news clip of this. It was an Australian news clip from when they played this show. So they kind of compared it to the Red Hot Chili Peppers and how they kind of handled a massive crowd surge in that situation, where everybody just kept bum rushing the front the entire time, almost trampling people. But Anthony Kiedis was just like, you guys gotta take a step back. Like, you just can't keep doing this the entire show. I get it. There are going to be people getting squished up at the front. You can't really do too much about that, but like, you can't be doing it to the point where you're about to start hurting other people. And obviously the Chili Peppers played the rest of their show, and the rest of it just went off without a hitch. So Bizkit play their show in, I believe it would have been Sydney, Australia at this point. And bear in mind, like, this lineup kicks ass. Like Rammstein, Queens of the Stone Age, Mudvayne. This would have been killer to see back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
So what winds up happening is a very similar situation. And this is why I told Haley this, that, and even Dave from the Trainwreck miniseries on Netflix even said this a couple of weeks ago about their performance at Woodstock, which I know in that podcast I kind of not so much defended, but tried to toe the line with. In this case, I have absolutely no defense for any of what Bizkit, or more in particular Fred, was doing at this point, because this was basically just a repeat of the entire Woodstock situation minus the fire. And the bum rushing was so bad that security literally had to push people out to create a hole and start physically lifting people out of the crowd. Like, that was pretty much the majority of the show, and Durst was just basically saying the security guards didn't know what they were doing, calling them certain slurs that I will not say, but you know which one I'm referring to. Just kept on playing the music, stopping the crowd. Like, even the security and like festival organizers had to get involved and be like, guys, you got to step back. And it's not until about like halfway through the show that Fred eventually is like, there's trouble going down in the front, step back. And literally, it's so bad at this point that police were like, we gotta let Limp Bizkit keep playing, otherwise there could be a riot if we just don't. So don't get involved, let them finish the show. And I say all of that in mind because one girl died in the pit at that gig.
Yeah, that was pretty tragic.
Yeah, and this, like, granted, Bizkit did do what they could to be like, hey, we know our band is at the height of our popularity, and there are going to be a lot of people mostly here to see us. You gotta have like what they call the, I've been to festivals a lot, they call it the T barricade, which kind of splits the crowd in half, where you have one side blocked off by another set of barricades and kind of splits the crowd in half and kind of reduces some of that tension. But like, I've been on both sides of the fence, where I've been bum rushed even with the T barricade in mind at festivals. So it's not like it does nothing, but it's also not going to prevent shit like that from happening. But I really do think that this just goes to show you that Bizkit really were amateurs in terms of like crowd work at this point in their live shows. And it really could have prevented somebody from losing their life at one of their gigs. So with that preamble in mind, a certain big event happens later on. And I say this in mind because there is a discussion about the next album in the summer of like 2001. So with that in mind, too, there's also a planned cover of Relax by Frankie Goes to Hollywood that's meant for the Zoolander soundtrack, but that ultimately gets scrapped from the movie for whatever reason. There's never been an explanation. Power Man 5000 does a cover of the exact same song anyway. Mike, I say all of this in mind because do you want to quote Lars Ulrich here?
Why don't you go ahead?
He quit the fucking band. I had to work that in somewhere. So it's very obvious that Wes Borland quits the band in 2001. Now, Mike, do you want to know why Wes quit the band?
On top of everything that happened at Big Day Out?
No, it was actually on orders from his doctor. His doctor actually told him, Wes, you can't keep carrying this band anymore. You've got to quit. I had to work that joke in. I am not sorry. So joking aside, it's never been given a clear, concrete reason as to why Wes quit the band. A lot of people argue it is embarrassment. And while that is true to some extent, Wes has said in interviews that the whole Big Day Out incident was a huge contributing factor. And I did kind of allude to this in the Chocolate Starfish episode that we did. Even in the Playboy Mansion special, he even just kind of says to Ananda Lewis at one point, like, I don't even really like any of the songs on the album, to be honest.
Yeah, you can kind of tell from that launch party that he's been feeling kind of disconnected emotionally for a little bit.
Well, we can't even say it's kind of a Frusciante Chili Peppers situation, really, because when you get down to it, Wes always kind of was the oddball of the band, just kind of thrown into this jokey frat boy kind of band, if you really think about it. So it is a bit of a weird pairing, but at the same time, it also makes sense. So the entire situation of Wes leaving the band really is kind of how this album is going to proceed going forward, because in 2002 they pull, I would probably say, the biggest failed publicity stunt I've ever seen a band pull off. Mike, did you hear about the Put Your Guitar Where Your Mouth Is tour that they did?
You told me about this earlier. It's a bizarre kind of publicity stunt, and it kind of shows how desperate the band was to find a suitable replacement.
Well, yes, and at the same time, no, because to kind of fill in the gaps, and I'm not going to try to repeat the recent video that Rock and Roll True Stories did on this entire thing. So,
oh yeah, definitely give that video a watch.
Oh, it's an absolute goldmine for comedy, and absolutely fascinating how Bizkit even remotely got away with this, because I think in 2022 they would be getting sued up the ass for this. So what wound up happening was the Put Your Guitar Where Your Mouth Is tour was Limp Bizkit would go to Guitar Center stores across the US to audition people to join Limp Bizkit, which, you know, on paper is kind of a genius idea, rather than them just going like, hey, Korn, who would you recommend? Hey, Coal Chamber, who would you recommend? It kind of makes sense, them trying to like just audition people from the general public to try to see who's the weird eclectic personality that can potentially replace Wes Borland. And I just want to say, for the record, Mike, that part in the intro where the MTV clip drops in the replacement to Wes Borland and then the heavy synth comes in, that was completely unintended. Like, I was just honestly editing it, and that was like, okay, that timing's perfect. I got to keep that in there. So what winds up happening where it becomes problematic is the contract that they were getting people to sign. So basically, you're not even allowed to play music from the band you're auditioning to join.
Wait, what?
Yeah, you are not allowed to play any Limp Bizkit songs. You are not allowed to do any guitar solos, no covers, even though Bizkit literally built their fame off of doing covers. So basically, you had to play original material that you wrote yourself and that you came up with. That's not copywritten. So the Too Long Didn't Read version, for people who might not have gotten that, you're basically helping Limp Bizkit write their next record. I'm going to say that again. You are basically playing original material and giving it hand over fist. Like, there were people in legitimate local bands playing their own original material, not knowing that they were basically signing away their music to not get credit for contributing to a Limp Bizkit album.
That is very, very shady.
Yeah, like, I get it. Bizkit aren't Pantera or Testament or Dream Theater, where there's a lot of shreddy bits. So, like, I get not doing guitar solos exactly, but, like, considering a guitar solo prominently gets featured on the next album, what in the absolute fuck? But, like, it to me, that would have at least given the band a chance to potentially win over, you know, the guitar nerd crowd like I do, because, like, I love solos. Like, why wouldn't you want to throw solos in a really groove heavy song that's just aggressive as hell? Like, why would you not want to do that? But this also is another contributing factor to why this album kind of just becomes what it becomes, is that Durst actually doxed Wes Borland. So what happens is Durst actually leaks Wes Borland's email online, and according to Wes, 75% of the people replying to him were just saying, please do not rejoin Limp Bizkit.
Wow.
And I also have to bring this up because R.I.P. Eddie Van Halen, you fucking rule, dude. So Eddie Van Halen also apparently at least jammed with the band at one point or another. And I say all of this in mind because this is basically the Too Long Didn't Read version for people. The Too Long Didn't Read version is Eddie Van Halen basically left his gear at Fred Durst's house. And you want to know what Eddie Van Halen did, Mike?
What?
Showed up in a goddamn tank, points a gun at Fred Durst, and then says, give me my fucking guitars back, asshole. And you basically see Eddie Van Halen smoking a cigarette, gun in hand, pointing it at Durst as he lugs his guitar amps and his equipment out to the Batmobile, basically.
That is an awesome image.
That needs to be in the biopic that comes out for Eddie Van Halen. That needs to be in the movie, or else I'm rioting. We also brought this up in the Chocolate Starfish episode. No, we will not be doing an episode on new old songs. We're not covering an album where 5 out of 16 of the tracks is basically remixes of My Way, 2 separate versions of Nookie, and another version of Get Your Groove On. No.
Nope.
That's a whole lot of no. I've seen and listened to a lot of crap in my lifetime. I'm not doing that. So instead, Mike, did you ever end up picking 3 albums for better remix albums you could be listening to?
So there's one, which is kind of the obvious, Linkin Park's Reanimation. That's kind of like the gold standard for me. The other 2 are a little bit more out there. The unofficial remix of the Gray album, which is the Beatles' White Album mixed with Jay-Z's The Black Album. Very, very unconventional, but I thought Danger Mouse did a good job putting that together. And then number 3 is, I don't know if this really counts as a remix album, but it's the soundtrack to the Beatles' Cirque du Soleil show Love, which has some pretty cool new arrangements of like all of their classic material.
Hey, that works. My 3 picks, 2 of them are very obvious, but I don't feel like they're going to get as talked about in the grand scheme of remix albums. And one is very obvious because it needs to get brought up. One of the not obvious ones is Recoded by Fear Factory, which recently came out just this year. It's amazing. It has everything from super heavy Fear Factory riffs to a song that's straight up a synthwave song. My second pick for another not as talked about record is the remix album of Year Zero by 9 Inch Nails. Really, any 9 Inch Nails remix album I could have picked, but I argue a lot of these tracks are better than what's on the original Year Zero as is. And then my last is the obvious pick, and that is Emotion by A Perfect Circle, which, ironic enough, just as I think about it, actually has a remix of Weak and Powerless done by Wes Borland on it.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, it basically just turns it into a much heavier song and is very riff heavy and has a pretty kick-ass guitar solo in it. So Emotion by A Perfect Circle. Go jam it. It kicks ass. So with that in mind, 2002 rolls around. Limp Bizkit basically head back into the studio at like the halfway point of the year to start work on album number 4. So to kind of eventually just cut to the meat and potatoes of this record, the sessions vary between multiple producers, guitarists, and musicians playing on this thing, ranging from, on the production side of things, Rick Rubin and Terry Date. Yes, Rick Rubin actually gets to produce for a Bizkit album, finally, but Terry Date and Rick Rubin really are the only 2 main producers that end up on most of the official album. And you can kind of see where things are about to go, where Rick Rubin produces the obviously very melodic songs on it, and then Date produces most of the really guitar-driven side of things. So, on the other side, the musician side of things, Al Jorgensen from Ministry, Rivers Cuomo from Weezer, Paige Hamilton from Helmet, Bubba Sparks, Head from Korn, and I have to bring this up because we're big Alter Bridge fans and we're also big Trivium fans, and because he produced Silence in the Snow, Michael Elvis Basquiat even plays on this album.
That's the one that kind of surprised me looking at the credits.
Oh, like it's kind of hard to tell who actually is, quote, replacing Wes Borland in this band at this point. So I say this with no disrespect intended. So Mike Smith basically ends up being the official, quote unquote, replacement to Wes Borland. So I got to clear up one massive misconception, because obviously, Mike, you've probably listened to the band Snot, right?
I've heard like some of their music, not all of it.
Well, it's kind of difficult to quote hear all of it, because really they only had one album before Lynn Straight died in 98. So it's kind of difficult to have that be the case. But the too long didn't read version of it for you would be Mike Smith really was only a touring member of Snot. And basically his connection to Bizkit was Snot and Limp Bizkit played on the 98 Ozfest together. So obviously they would have been familiar with each other. So it was mostly Sonny Mayo, who would eventually go on to join Seven Dust, and Mikey Doling, who did the guitar work in Snot. So really, this is Mike Smith's biggest claim to fame, is being in Bizkit for this year and a half so period. And I guess the very last thing before we really tear into this album, aside from like the million different titles this thing had, is the tour that I really wish I could have gone to in the summer of 2003. And that obviously would be Metallica's Summer Sanitarium tour, which obviously Limp Bizkit would play on. But Mike, guess who else plays on this tour?
That was Deftones and Linkin Park and Mudvayne?
Yes. So I bring this tour up because I had to include this in the intro, and I really wish I could have included the clip of when James Hetfield goes to thank all of the bands for playing that night. Everybody gets some kind of applause, but as soon as Bizkit's name gets brought up, James immediately gets roared with boos and hisses. And even James is like, all right, yeah, you guys have opinions. Yeah. Like even Hetfield can't try to save that. So, I mean, I say all of that in mind because Bizkit basically only play half an hour of their goddamn show, and they're slated to play like an hour and a half, but the booing and basically the just onslaught of garbage getting hurled their way literally on stage is enough to get Durst to basically like antagonize them and start dropping a bunch of slurs at them. So yeah, to say Bizkit was not loved in the public eye, kind of an understatement. And the less said about what happens between Bizkit and Zakk Wylde that we say, aside from the intro, the better.
Yeah. Ready to move on to the album in question?
Yes, because September 23rd, 2003, 3 years after Chocolate Starfish, we get the follow-up, Results May Vary. I kind of had to include that preamble before we start talking about the music on display, because I really don't feel like trying to figure out who plays guitar where and when and who produces what track. I really feel more like just going after the songs in question, especially because what we're going to do, because you could say we decided to punish ourselves with this. Mike, take over for this one.
Okay, so we're going to start with the intro, Re-Entry, which the best way I can describe this is, it does what an intro is supposed to do, but it's also kind of one of the biggest cop teases of the record, because that guitar riff halfway through this track is actually really good, but the track itself is only like 2 minutes.
Actually, I was going to get you to bring up how a lot of outtakes from this record have leaked onto the internet. So what we're basically going to do track by track, we're still going to do our track by track breakdown about why this album really does not work and how it's a terrible album. And, talk about the 2 music videos in question. But what we're going to do every time we trash a song on the album, we have to pick a replacement from one of the B-sides that was intended to be on this record. So every time we trash a song, it gets replaced with another. But to kind of build on what you said, Re-Entry, it does what it does well. It gets you hyped to hear the record. Granted, it basically is just a carnival barker hyping up the band, and then a chipmunk version of Fred Durst tells him to chill out, dog. and just says, "What is it?" And then the carnival barker says, "It is Limp Bizkit," and then the guitars kick in. That's basically the intro.
Yeah.
But I mean, it works for what it intends to do. Oh dear God, too bad it's all downhill from here. Oh fuck. Okay.
All right.
Can we tear the Band-Aid off with how terrible Eat You Alive is?
Oh, it is disgusting.
It's not just disgusting, it's unimaginably bad. Like, oh my God. Like, you would think it would start off fine enough with the heavy guitar riffs until your brain kicks in and realizes this riff is insanely simplistic. And, you know, considering that they wrote break stuff, yeah, I get it. They're not exactly known for like ultra technical death metal at this point, but I mean, even by nu metal standards, this riff is kind of lame.
Yeah, it sounds basically like Puddle of Mud or like Trust Company or whatever butt rock bands were popular around this time.
And considering Puddle of Mud were basically being pushed by Durst the most, I can see that comparison making the most sense. But at the same time, this is your first song out of the gate, and this is the first song you release as a lead single. Musically, for me, this really does not work because the first minute and a half is dedicated to this riff, and then it just goes into this ultra melodic section about we gotta address the pop stars in the room. Oh God, the lyrics. So this is the part of the podcast where we get ultra tabloidy, and this really does not matter 20 years later, but you can't discuss this album without discussing it. So, Mike, how do we show our age?
Do you remember the tabloids back when Britney Spears and Fred Durst supposedly had a thing?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Because my mom religiously watched Access Hollywood all the time when I was growing up. So literally the biggest, you know, quote unquote pop stars at this point were Fred Durst, Eminem, Christina, and Britney. So, you know, just the idea of Fred and Britney hooking up, it makes sense, but it also doesn't. Especially consider, and just for the record, everyone, a lot of our research is basically going off of the MTV making of documentary that is available on YouTube. So a lot of our information comes from that. Don't trust Wikipedia, where it says literally quotes of Fred Durst a year after this album had already been out, because I do find that happens a lot. So, but to kind of get back on what we were saying, yeah, a lot of this album has to do with Fred Durst and Britney Spears' alleged affair and obvious breakup. So a lot of the lyrical content has to do with this. And oh my God, the lyrics really do not do the song any justice either. A lot of it really just comes off as creepy try hard bullshit, and it just is unsettling in the worst possible way. Like, I feel more comfortable listening to Chris Barnes era Cannibal Corpse than I do hearing about how Fred Durst is a man that can do whatever he wants, including wanting to sniff on Britney Spears' panties. Those are exact lyrics, people. We listened to this album multiple times, so you don't have to. And he says that on this record. I mean, I guess this isn't the world's worst scenario. We could have gotten Just Drop Dead put on this album, which apparently was directed towards Britney on this thing, which considering her meltdown not even about 3 or 4 years after this thing, yeah, it just kind of makes the entire experience all the more scuzzy.
Yeah. After today, I hope I never have to hear the song ever again.
With that in mind, we have to continue talking about this because since this was the lead-off single, this also got a music video. And I have to say, this has to be the second worst Bizkit video. So, Mike, how do we break down the premise of the video to Eat You Alive?
You mean besides apologizing to Bill Paxton's family?
Yes, Hudson from Aliens is in this, but the basic plot of this video is Limp Bizkit kidnapped Thora Birch. So this is arguably the second worst thing in her career, having to deal with Kevin Spacey being number one, now having to deal with a horny for Britney Fred Durst, where she basically has a very redneck, dirty version of him screaming at her into a megaphone, waving a hose like it's his dick in front of her, getting her wet, and then lighting up the entire forest with lights. That's the video. So I say all of that in mind because I'm going to crack another joke here, and it's basically going to be me stealing / paraphrasing Ed the Sock from his fromage segment on this video. How is this dad not able to find in a dark forest Christmas lights lighting it up and hearing heavy metal music from a mile away?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And the best joke that Ed the Sock would make, I really miss Much Music, guys. That's why I'm going to keep quoting it. For my next Ed the Sock quote for here, for Bizkit's next video, they should kidnap Wes Borland. So, considering that we basically just verbally eviscerated Eat You Alive, here's what we're going to replace it with on the album. And this was actually supposed to be the lead-off single. It was a song called Crack Addict, which was originally intended to be the lead single, like I just mentioned. And this was even premiered at WrestleMania in 2003. And was the first time that Mike Smith got to play with the band. Head from Korn even was on stage with them. Like, Head from Korn apparently did a lot of behind the scenes work on this thing.
Oh, so he wasn't just on that one track?
No, he's not just on the one song that's on the album. He actually, I'm thinking he might have contributed more guitar work, but like, again, so much of it is up in the air who actually played on which. So again, your guess is as good as mine. I'm not going to try and figure it out, but Crack Addict's a legit good song. Like, I truly do not understand why this was cut from the record.
Me neither. It feels like a very classic Limp Bizkit track.
Yeah.
In pretty much every sense.
And at the same time, it also kind of feels heavier than a lot of what was on Chocolate Starfish to begin with. Like, there's even one lyric that I actually really like on it. My significant chocolate $3 bills from the cockpit. Like, okay, I was like, okay, that line's kind of cute. But no, like, once it gets to that groove section towards the end where it's just Sam's bass and it just kind of slows down, that's the only part where it slows down. And then Fred just starts screaming, "I'm a crack addict. That's right, you heard me, I'm a crack addict." And then just the riffs kick in and it's like, why was this cut? Like, we hear nothing confirmed or denied. You agree to play it live on national television. Why do you cut this?
You know, I would love to assume they cut it for time, but this album is, you know,
considering how much time this album wastes on droney ballads, it would be nice to have a more guitar-driven track here.
Exactly.
So with that in mind, especially if you replace Eat You Alive with Crack Addict in its place, Gimme the Mic makes a lot more sense considering Crack Addict's already about how Bizkit don't really like the bands that they've influenced. Like, I mean, considering that a lot of people were more just going for the crazy town side of nu metal and how Trapped was getting popular at this point, can you really blame Bizkit for writing a song like Crack Addict and then having it go into Gimme the Mic at least musically would make the most sense to me, at least.
Yeah, and I think they're even both in the same key too. So yeah, they basically pair really well together.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not following Eat You Alive, I do think Gimme the Mic could have worked exceptionally well in the track listing. Yes, it does go back to their formula of lifting choruses from other artists. In this case, it's Microphone Fiend by Eric B. and Rakim lifting another one of their choruses. Yes, it is mostly Durst just swearing, and yeah, the lyrical content was done better when it was called Get This by Slipknot. But if we do decide to keep it in the track listing, it at least has guitar, it's at least aggressive, it at least has double kick in a few places. I can't get mad at it if it's following Crack Addict. So like I know that sounds like a backhanded compliment to the song, but at the same time, it's the only way we're going to get through this record is if we at least have some level of optimism.
Yeah, because like you brought up, so much time on this album is wasted by the drony ballads that at least it would help to at least front load it with some heavier tracks to keep the energy moving.
Yeah, this album really just kind of grinds to, like, even if you keep Eat You Alive, even if you weirdly like that song, and I will say weirdly in this case because yeah, that song is hot garbage. Considering Underneath the Gun is the fourth song here and it's very drony, it is very slow, it goes nowhere. And this is the first time Bizkit have a guitar solo on any of their albums. Like, even before Wes ends up rejoining the band completely, spoiler alert, like, this is the first time a guitar solo gets to be implemented by the band, and it is so dull. You might as well have just even gutted it from the song, and you pretty much would miss nothing.
The fact that I don't even remember the solo, and I just respun the album like recently, tells you how bad this song is.
And again, it all boils down to a lot of the lyrics, and I kind of brought up this complaint with Chocolate Starfish and the hot dog flavored water. Is it just kind of feels like with that album, the rest of the band was prepared to go into this album just, guns blazing. Let's just write as many heavy riffs as we can. Let's make the best music we possibly can. And then Durst is like, I gotta write lyrics. I'm kind of backed into a corner where I gotta follow up this record. And he got lucky with this. Oh my God, this is indulgent ego trip bullshit if I've ever heard, because if we're going based off of that MTV making of documentary, it literally is just about how he's working so hard on making this album.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and it doesn't end there because we got to get into the Britney moping. I
Down
don't
another
really
day.
I don't want to talk about Underneath the Gun anymore, so Down Another Day. This isn't even an Alice in Chainsy kind of ballad that's, dark and brooding and menacing and just kind of gets you in that atmosphere and vibe. this just feels like a mopey breakup song.
It's very mopey.
And it's not like you get any like really unique acoustic guitar work. A lot of it is, and this is no disrespect to Sam Rivers, but the bass line in this case, it doesn't really do it any favors other than just kind of makes it feel all the more droney.
Yeah, it's just kind of flat throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's pretty much all I can really say about Underneath the Gun and Down Another Day is that they just continue this it's very Chinese democracy like in that it just loads this album with so many ballads that just do not work in its favor. And so much so that I actually forgot to even say what songs we were replacing both of them with. So in this case, my pick actually would be Shot. Again, it at least kind of keeps the momentum going. Yeah, it's very kind of mid-tempo, but at least has enough of a heavy groove to it and enough energy to it to kind of keep the album moving rather than just stalling and running out of gas like 4 or 5 songs deep. And then Gut Down Another Day, and as much as I don't want more Britney moping, at least Press Your Luck has a nice guitar riff and groove to it.
So just to recap, in the revised album, we start with Reentry, then it's Crack Addict, then Give Me the Mic, and then Shot.
Yeah, exactly. And then if we want to throw in Press Your Luck, and if you want to throw in a remix, and in a perfect world where Eminem and Bizkit never fell out, have a remix of it with Business, because I've seen that floating around on the internet and it works shockingly well.
Ooh, I like that.
Oh, especially considering Business is one of the best songs on the Eminem show. So anyways, unfortunately, we can't continue talking about better records. So next in the track list, I'm really only keeping this because I have no idea what else you're going to replace it with. So Almost Over.
Well, that title's a fucking lie.
Unfortunately, but I mean, I guess you can't say they aren't self-aware about their relevancy at this point. Yeah, Almost Over. Lyrically, it's not very good. That's not really a dead giveaway, considering if you've heard the song, it's mostly him rhyming boy with boy with boy with boy with man with man with man with man. That's most of the verses, people. Like, even when Wes came back to the band, this and Eat You Alive really would be the only 2 songs that they would play, which kind of is a telling sign about how the rest of this record's going to go. But I don't know, at least it has kind of a nice enough of a groove. It at least feels like a Bizkit song that belongs here, which is, I guess, why we're putting it in the keeper category.
Yeah, like I don't like the song, but at least feels closer to their signature style. Like you said, it's a very amateur rhyming scheme to keep rhyming boy in one chunk of the verse, and then in the other verse, it's that's one of those basic cardinal sins in rap music. You don't rhyme the same word twice.
Yeah, at least it's not full of la-las, not-nas, and doot-doos to kind of quote Strombad. But yeah, that's about as nice of a compliment as I can really give this song. It just kind of is what it is. And weird enough, this was actually intended to be a single on this album. But one of the big problems with this album was also this basically was buried not long after it came out. Like, I kind of alluded to this in other episodes, maybe, or, just between me and Mike. After 2003, I heard nobody talking about Limp Bizkit anymore. Like, nobody talked about them. Nobody talked about them in any positive light. Nobody was even so much as listening to them at that rate. So, I mean, I think that's one of the other album's downsides, or some people it might not be from that perspective, considering that it's terrible. It just did not get any promotion whatsoever behind it. And that's where we also lead into another intended single for it.
Oh,
which
Build a Bridge was supposed to be a single?
Oh, yeah, they were supposed to shoot a single with it in 2004 when they were still touring behind the album in Europe, but what wound up happening was absolutely fuck all. No joke.
That makes sense.
It literally got as buried and forgotten as you can get. And I don't even think Build a Bridge is even one of the worst ballads on here. I do think it kind of works. Yeah, it's still droney. Yeah, it is another ballad about Fred swooning over a girl, in this case going off of the MTV documentary, him thirsting for Angelina Jolie in that time period. Like, just knowing that it's basically him thirsting over her for about 4 minutes kind of detracts from some of the impact of the song that it would have had. Like, even that John Otto drum fill part of the way through the song after the acoustic guitar bit, I'll throw it in the keeper category, because again, I don't know what else you would replace it with.
Yeah, me neither. This one, kind of like you said, it's the best of the worst kind of songs on the record.
And then this is where we take a break from any edgy new metal or any mopey ballads, because here's a rap song.
Are you sure it's a rap song, or is this a parody of a rap song?
Or is it, how can Snoop Dogg outclass Fred Durst in about 4-ish minutes and literally just, oh my God, Red Light, Green Light's kind of a mess. I don't know which is worse of the last two rap songs, Get Your Groove On or this. At least Snoop Dogg is memorable enough to kind of carry it, and the DJ Lethal beat isn't bad per se. It's just most of the chorus is Fred Durst just going freak baby, freak baby over and over and over again, and just going red light, green light, red light, green light. You ready to go? Tell me when you're ready to roll. Tell me when you're ready to go. Like, that's the chorus.
Yeah, not a great chorus, but at least Snoop is bringing his energy into it.
Obviously, it's not going to be as good as any of his features on 2001 or The Chronic or anything off of Doggy Style, but I mean, whatever. I'll take some positives, I guess, from all of this. I don't really have much nice to say about this. Red Light, Green Light sucks, and the interlude really does not do itself any favors either.
Nope.
It's more crying over Britney and about how Fred's gonna cry himself to sleep. Oh, fucking boo-hoo. No offense, Fred. We love you. We'd love to interview you possibly one day. Please don't blacklist us. This probably isn't going to do what I just said any favors, because now we're going to get into trashing some butt rock.
Yep.
Oh God, only one. What am I replacing Red Light, Green Light with? When It Rains isn't a bad kind of trip hoppy sounding song. At least the beat's really good on it. I'll give it credit. So at least, and that's kind of the other thing I'm just noticing about this album. This is very devoid of features.
Yeah, outside of again, We don't know how much Brian Head Welch contributed to the record, but like outside of that and Snoop Dogg, there's like nobody else.
Yeah, there's no features from anyone from Korn. There's no Stained features. There's no Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots. No DMX. No Method Man or Redman. Yeah, like in some cases, you would be like, okay, they dialed it back on the guest features. Good. But in this case, you're really left under the ego trip of Fred Durst crying over Britney Spears, which I kind of got to bring this up. What did she even actually do to justify his ire?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because even in the documentary, like the most I gathered from that is Brittany went on TRL and said like, "Oh, we
hardly
really
knew him."
Yeah,
yeah, and then he goes on Howard Stern describing like how she, let's just say, grooms the drapes. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah, for the record, he actually did that. I'm not trying to search out to, give Durst a hard time, but like he did that back in 2003, people. And like considering all of the shit that's been going on with Britney Spears in just the past year, like I know this is a metal show and mostly a metal show, I should say, and we don't really talk about pop stuff a lot, and it's very tabloidy to bring up, but again, you can't talk about this album without bringing it up, and it's kind of to its detriment.
Yeah, everything that we know about Britney Spears today makes this album that much more uncomfortable to listen to.
Yeah, again, at least they had the decency not to put Just Drop Dead on the album, because I think I genuinely believe that TikTok would be coming for Limp Bizkit. I genuinely would believe that.
Oh, yeah, they're like, if that was ever a real possibility, they'd already have their torches and pitchforks ready to go.
Pretty much. All right, let's get back into what I'm gonna deem the next three songs. I think are probably the three worst on the album. So we start off with Only One, and like I said, this is as butt rocky as the album gets. Mike, I'm going to let you take the reins on this. I'm kind of beat from talking about how bad the first half of this is. You go nuts.
All I have in my notes for The Only One is not good. Because again, this string of tracks, The Only One, track number 10, Let Me Down, and Lonely World, they all have the same problem. We don't need multiple tracks of Fred Durst moping and whining about you-know-who.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the thing with Only One is just that how he's looking for some deeper relationship, but it's all undercut by how he's, quote, not looking to screw until the vibe's right. Like, it's just so seedy and just gross that I'm like, this is not enjoyable to listen to. And like, yeah, you could argue that about some of Bizkit's other material on the previous three albums, but really this in particular just goes to territory that none of the music is doing this any favors whatsoever. So
the note I had for Let Me Down is not even John Otto's like percussion can save a ballad with, the same thing that Durst has been talking about the whole time.
Oh, exactly. I was actually just going to say my replacement for The Only One would be to replace it with Armpit, which apparently was a $3 bill y'all demo track, but basically they just reworked it and just made the guitars heavier. Yeah, the lyrics are still dumb on it, but at this point, I'm like, dumb lyrics on a Limp Bizkit album, par for the course.
Exactly.
With Let Me Down, I'm just going to cut into the replacement and just kind of make my jokes from here. My replacement for this is Nothing. Get Over Britney, Fred. That's the only thing I have to say about this entire song, is just that it's just so goddamn whiny. It is so goddamn mopey. It goes absolutely nowhere. None of it works. And it's not like a lot of these songs are made for, you know, getting the pit riled up. Like, even the songs that they don't really play off of, like Significant Other or $3 Bill, y'all, you can at least see why they might have gotten the pit going back in the day. But like this, it does absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
It's just frustrating. It's dull. It's directionless. And really the same thing can be said about Lonely World. Like it's very wannabe Linkin Park. That's really all I can say about Lonely World, is that it just kind of goes nowhere. It has some odd line about how much he hated high school, about how bullies were always getting him down, and how he's gonna sneak out and have sex with his goth girlfriend. And really all I have to say about this entire Britney situation and Fred is I'm going to quote Woody Harrelson from Zombieland. Mike, you ready?
Go.
Have you ever read that book, She's Just Not That Into You? So with that in mind, I really feel like there's no way we could kind of gloss over it. Like, these three songs really are kind of just the worst things you can deal with on the record. I would gut Lonely World and replace it with Cowgirls from Hell, because at least, again, it makes sense as a Bizkit song. It's the shout out song, which was missing from the last album. So if it was to make a reappearance here at all, sure, add it.
Yeah. Anything to make this sound more like a Limp Bizkit record and not like Durst's high school
Live
whining
journal entries.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, at least Phenomenon tries to get the momentum back up and running again, even if it does have some really odd lyrical refrains, like him doing a really bad version of Bring the Noise by Public Enemy. Not like he didn't already do it with fucking Stained, but that's besides the point. But at least the guitars get to come back on this thing, and at least, again, get that energy back up and going again. And they at least have the decency to bring that beat back section in again. So
yeah, we'll get to our quote unquote favorite tracks at the end of this record, but yeah, Phenomenon worked for what it's trying to do. It's not quite as good as Crack Addict or Give Me the Mic or even a later song on the record, but you know, it still sounds closer to home than anything else.
Yeah, it at least feels like it had some direction to it, at least, even if it does kind of feel studio engineered to just be. It really does kind of also just feel like a studio engineered Bizkit track. You know, I guess for better or worse, it at least results on a listenable song on this thing. Next track. I don't hate this one, actually, even if it is one of the slower ones. So Creamer, Radio is Dead, which actually has a lot of lyrics that were intended for the Relax cover that never actually came out.
Oh, I didn't realize they reused some lyrics.
Oh, not just some lyrics, all of it.
Oh,
like pretty much the only thing the cover of Relax has is the chorus, and it's all new verses. and at least that version has the decency to have some West Borland riffs over it. Yeah, again, considering that I said this is one of the better, slower tracks, yeah, it might not be saying much, but at least it kind of gives you that Bizkit feel to a lot of the songs, even if it does kind of feel like discount Linkin Park.
Yeah, it does kind of feel a little like that. All I have in my notes are radio is anything but dead. Like, I know nobody really listens to like traditional radio anymore. Now it's like it's either Spotify, Apple Music, or Sirius XM. But the radio's still out there.
My thing with a lot of this album, just realizing it now, is it just me or did Durst want to have some kind of commentary about the music industry and some of the evils with it? Or am I just reading into this too much and it's just a dumb song title? Like, I would want to give the benefit of a doubt, but at the same time, considering how most of this album is just dedicated to him about, wah, Britney dumped me, or maybe not, and I was kind of an asshole, wah, for most of this thing. So for me, it just kind of, again, I'm going to throw it in the keeper category just because I have no idea what else you would replace it with. I'm not going to add more ballads into an already ballad heavy record.
Yeah, the less ballads on this record, the better.
Which thankfully we get another heavier one finally. It's nice to actually finally talk about a song that's relatively heavy again.
Yeah, Head for the Barricade is good. This is like a sliver of what the band might have sounded like had they leaned closer to a heavier version of their house style.
I would say it's the closest you would get to seeing Bizkit adopting more traditional metal elements. Like, you even have John Otto doing a thrash beat towards the end section of the song, and it has like more of a tremolo pick vibe to it. Like, it at least has that going for it. Yeah, it has some pretty clunker lyrics, like about, him Durst trying to relate to how the kids at Columbine felt. Like, yeah, that lyric's really fucking dumb. But again, par for the course for this band at this rate. But at least for the most part, the song itself actually works in injecting some energy. I do think that if you wanted to market this album as something much heavier, have Crack Addict than this and maybe Armpit be singles. Yeah. I don't know if they would go over well as singles or maybe help the critical reception of the album, but I mean, it wouldn't just be him complaining about tabloidy bullshit.
Yeah, I think leading off those three as singles probably would help to some extent get the more like metal side of their fans to pick up the record.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, like, they were even playing it live on that Metallica tour that we were talking about. So it's just kind of like, I do see it as a waste, and them doing that really awful cover of Sanitarium at the MTV Icon Metallica show.
God, don't remind me.
Oh God, I don't know if it's as bad or worse than the cover we're about to talk about, but more on that in a minute. But like you said, it at least would have gotten maybe some more people to turn an ear and go, huh, this is what Limp Bizkit sound like now? So I guess with that shitty transition in mind, the big one, the showstopper, what I would personally argue would be the career killer and really what killed this album. Discover L-I-M-P. Pretend to speak and say just said that to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about that one. The cover of Behind Blue Eyes by The Who.
Let me get this embarrassing story out of the way.
Oh, go for it.
So this awful cover is actually the first time that I ever heard this song, like in general. And they used to play this all the time on VH1 Hits back when that was a thing. So I would watch this music video quite often. So watching it again to prepare for this podcast was like a huge wave of the not good nostalgia.
Yeah, more on the music video in a minute. I have a really good joke that's also kind of a it's kind of a rhetorical question, but also not. But okay, I'm gonna actually kind of toe the line with this cover to some extent. This cover genuinely could have worked. Could. I put emphasis on the word could have worked. I say all of this in mind because let's use another cover from the same time period as an example from the same year that this Drek came out in. Shinedown's cover of Simple Man by Lynyrd Skynyrd. Now, does Brent Smith need to full-blown scream the "Be Satisfied" section of the song? No, he doesn't. But, and you know, does he need to borderline white girl sing the choruses? No, he doesn't. But in terms of music, delivery, and intent, and also considering I've seen Shinedown live and Brent Smith doesn't do any of what he does on the studio version with their cover of Simple Man live, it really works as a simple, stripped down track that respects the original, but also has its own identity. I do think that this cover mostly does that. I say mostly because the goddamn speak and say going discover LIMP, it just immediately becomes self-indulgent advertising for their own fucking band.
Yeah. It's at that point that they completely annihilate whatever they were trying to do with this cover. They pissed it all away as soon as that speak and spell bridge started.
Yeah, it'd be like if Metallica was working in like some reference to Damage Incorporated in one of their Motorhead covers they did on Garage Inc., or if, you know, Lamb of God just worked in some lyric from one of their own songs in one of their covers on the Legion cover album they did as Burn the Priest. Like, as soon as you just try to make references to your own band, gut an entire section of the song and rewrite a third verse just to become about yourself, it just becomes tasteless and tacky. So, like, it's such a joke in and of itself that even Roger Daltrey at live shows goes, "This next song is a Limp Bizkit song." You got to admire the old man for having a sense of humor. So, and I told you this before we started recording, there were actually 2 music videos for this song.
The one that I saw was the Halle Berry one.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're not going to talk about the second one, which is basically just a live version that just does its best to cut out Wes Borland to the best of its ability, because it's like nothing but old 90s clips and some new stuff with Mike Smith in the band. But okay, yeah, the one that's basically a Gothica trailer with Fred Durst making out with Halle Berry, at least the man can say he has done that. I don't know. Mike, here's where I'm going to work in my joke. Which is more embarrassing to Halle Berry's career, this music video or Catwoman?
Yes.
That is the only answer to that question. Yes. Oh man, like literally, he's basically the replacement for not the you get what I mean though, but he's basically Robert Downey Jr. from that movie in the video, just minus any of the charisma.
Yeah.
This one gets in a replacement category because fuck it. I'm gonna throw in Lean on Me. Yeah. Is it basically a Stained song a la Limp Bizkit? Yeah. But in terms of album flow, at least the guitars aren't bland and at least give you that gloomier vibe to it, I guess. I don't know. I don't hate Lean on Me compared to some of the other ballads that they recorded for this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's okay.
Yeah. That's all I gotta say. If you're gonna replace it with anything, throw Lean on Me, unless you have nostalgia for this or you just want to see Halle Berry in something. Sure, keep it on the album, but for the rest of us, never again. So believe it or not, we have reached the end of this thing. Drown, which, oh, how is this slower?
Drown is a nothing track for me. Like, by this point in the record, I'm just so done. Durst's whining. I'm done with the ballads. I'm just done.
Yeah, I don't really have much to comment on the music side of things because it really is drowny, but drowsy is what I was meaning to say, but drowny almost makes me wish I was being drowned. But yeah, it's just a nothing track that just goes nowhere. And really the last verse kind of just feels like the death of nu metal be put to audio. If you really kind of think about it in context, like it really does just kind of go, maybe this is as big as we're going to get. And this is the end. We're done. And that's how you decide to close out the album. So this obviously is getting a replacement track, which I don't understand why this got cut and put on as a bonus track, because I think this belongs on the album instead. And no, it's not a cover of the Frozen song 10 years early. It's the song Let It Go, which actually deals with Wes Borland leaving the band and is, holy shit, about something else and him valuing Wes as a friend. Yeah, it's just another bitter track about Fred moping, and he never really admits culpability to his side into how Wes was leaving the band. I mean, but at the same time, this is the guy who wrote Nookie, for Christ's sakes. And at least on the music side of things, as an album closer, I think musically it works to its advantage and at least kind of ends it on a high note.
Yeah. It feels to some extent like a good closer track, because to some extent you could argue that this is sort of, again, until Wes rejoins the band, this is kind of like Durst's attempt at a closure for, having a falling out with one of his close friends.
Yeah, exactly. But it kind of just ends up feeling like complete nothing in the end, considering this is where I'm just gonna kind of expand on something that I was hinting at in the Chocolate Starfish episode that we did. Durst cannot commit to anything or just have any real follow through with anything that he says he's going to do. I mean, I'm just going to use some examples just to kind of drive home my point, is that David Fincher actually was supposed to produce his first movie that he was making. It was supposed to be this drama called Runt. That obviously never ended up coming out. Another was a skateboarding action movie called Lords of Dogtown, which did come out, but the caveat, yes, it was produced by David Fincher, but it was not directed by Durst. Mike, tell our good audience who wound up directing it.
This was directed by Catherine Hardwicke, who would go on to direct the first Twilight.
This is where Jacob really should just out of nowhere insert the Psycho theme, and I would not blame him for doing so.
As if I would turn down that invitation.
Yeah, even with the fanatic, Durst is still the better director than her just because he didn't make Twilight. Then there was also, this was more later on, but like he was supposed to do a TV sitcom for, I think it would have been either NBC, either one of the major networks. It was supposed to be a sitcom called Douchebag, and it was supposed to be a semi-autobiographical sitcom about him.
Wow.
Because of course. So I say all of that in mind because we like you guys, because you guys have been on this journey with us. We're going to give you a bit of a bonus album in the middle of all of this to kind of drive home my point, because after touring behind Results May Vary is done, there are tours Bizkit were supposed to go out and do. One was an Australian tour with Kiss, and this would have been their first time in Australia since the Big Day Out incident happened. And another summer tour in favor of going into the studio with Mike Smith to do a new album. But our favorite prodigal son on guitar returned to the band. Yes, that's right, people. Wes Borland rejoined Limp Bizkit in 2004, and I would personally argue this is really their last chance to save and maintain a career. So how come this album never came out, you might be asking? It did, but that's the thing. It's not technically an album, guys. Mike, introduce this one.
So in 2005, Limp Bizkit released an EP called The Unquestionable Truth, Part 1. Yeah, Part 1 of what was supposed to be a 2-part project. This is a very interesting release. It's, first of all, you got Ross Robinson back to produce, which is cool.
And actually, I'm going to jump in with something. So I was listening to a podcast about this because this is where we have to introduce a bit of a caveat. So it's a reunion with Wes Borland, but one major problem, and I hate to make fun of somebody in their addiction, but I can only imagine that John Otto really got hooked on drugs because of Head from Korn, considering how close the two were. Because the big fun fact about this album, John Otto barely plays any drums on this thing.
The only track that he's prominently featured on is
yeah, exactly. So John Otto's replacement is Sammy Siegler, who, because I have to bring this up in every podcast we do, actually has a Ginger Snaps connection. So Sammy Siegler he played on Glassjaw's first album, and Siberian Kiss is very prominently featured when Ginger and Bridget meet Sam the drug dealer in like the first 20 minutes of Ginger Snaps. So obviously I have to bring that up. So yeah,
of course,
considering John Otto is basically out of commit. This is basically, I don't know exactly why he didn't play on the album. Like, especially considering Head from Korn basically recorded Untouchables and Take a Look in the Mirror all methed out and could barely play his instrument. at least those came out sounding like full Korn albums. With this, I'm not even sure what would have happened, because it's as good as anybody's guess. It's basically been scrubbed from his Wikipedia page, and the only thing that really exists that's a making of documentary behind this album, it's mostly just something that would have wound up on a DVD.
Yeah, so nothing really concrete there.
Yeah, so considering that we mostly have Sammy Siegler as our drummer on the album, and Wes Borland is back in the band, and the band want to make something genuinely and legitimately heavy, go for it. And considering Ross is back, this is a good sign. The only problem is this basically just got turned into an EP. And I think that's this album's biggest problem, is that it just feels unfinished.
Yeah.
Like I do think Propaganda going into The Truth, it does work, like in terms of album flow, but in between, I would say maybe between The Truth and The Priest, or between The Priest and The Key. By the way, this album literally just features the word "the" in the titles of all of these songs. It really does feel like songs are missing in between here, or like intros even. Like, one thing that we didn't really touch on much with The Results May Vary is DJ Lethal, and let's just be honest, Lethal contributes hardly anything to that fucking record.
Yeah.
Kind of is the same for all of Unquestionable Truth. Like, the most he does is like a lot of samples and keyboards when you get down to it. But let's talk some positives about the record, because I mean, we really only have 7 songs to go off of. Personally, I would argue The Truth might be one of the best legitimate good songs they've ever written.
Oh, yeah, no, for certain, this is one of their best.
Oh, it's got some of Wes's best riffs on it. It's got a killer bass line to introduce it. Yeah, it does kind of feel borderline plagiarism of Rage Against the Machine, but hey, if the intention was to kind of pick up where Rage Against the Machine left off, I'm not going to complain too much.
Me neither.
The Priest, yeah, it's uncomfortable to listen to Durst doing his best Chino Marino impression, talking about what, without going into super graphic details, what priests do to and still continue to do to children because of their religion. It's a pretty good anti-religious anthem, considering that Durst would go on about how he was such a massive Christian on MTV. So it's kind of nice to see him criticizing his own religion there, I guess. And the line about him mentioning Dimebag being murdered on stage, R.I.P. Dimebag. And I would also, like, considering that most of this album is Durst just rapping, a lot of people would argue that's a fault, but considering Results May Vary was him mostly singing, yeah, I would argue this is kind of a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and honestly, his flow on most of these songs, or even all of them, I'd say, is really good.
Yeah, he's not Zach Del Roca. He's not Be Real from Cypress Hill. He's not Chuck D from Public Enemy levels of good, but the main thing here is that at least is a sign of improvement, that they were genuinely trying to move in this direction. And even the Surrender, considering that Fred is largely singing on this track, it actually works as an album closer, but it also kind of just feels empty-handed, considering this isn't closing out an album. It just closes out an EP that just feels really unfinished.
Yeah, it's like starting a movie and then just kind of turning it off halfway and then never revisiting it.
Yeah, because like they've talked about a part 2 for so long that it's just kind of like, did you guys even record it or finish it? Because like even Sammy Siegler was like, yeah, we were just writing a song a day at Ross's studio, but the album just ended up turning into what it was. It just got turned into an EP, and Durst was basically just saying, we're going to release this as an underground album with no advertising, no promotion. They didn't go on MTV to promote it. They did absolutely nothing with this thing. And I would almost kind of argue to its detriment, because I do think, and I'm going to use some modern examples, but also some time period examples to kind of illustrate my point. I do think had Bizkit just been like, you know what, let's scale back the live shows and just play clubs, or maybe even open for some bands. Let's go do some smaller tours, grind it out in a van again, still go on MTV, but instead of TRL, let's go on Headbangers Ball.
There we go. That would have been one way to restore their popularity.
And to kind of use Lorna Shore as an example, mostly play songs in this newer style, mostly play songs off of the newer, like, yeah, maybe throw in something like, I don't know what you would throw in. Gut Any Results May Vary, obviously. Maybe Head for the Barricade Keep, but like Gut Faith, play maybe Counterfeit, maybe play something like Break Stuff or Nobody Like You, but like cut a lot of the cornier sounding songs and just commit to this new direction and style, and maybe open for some bands that you were feuding with, like maybe open for System of a Down even. But you know, Wes Borland ultimately just ended up saying that it just ended up being self-sabotage, and he just kind of was like, maybe he was unhappy with the music already and was just like, let's just bury this thing before it even really kind of takes off. So it's just kind of like, it's all speculation, I guess, whether we will see a part 2 or not. Well, I think that we can both agree we would recommend checking this EP out, right?
Oh, yes, of course. But whether or not there'll ever be a part 2, I think that ship has sailed.
That's like Avatar fans to expect a Shyamalan sequel to The Last Airbender and expecting it to be good. It's not going to happen. So now that I've got the Shyamalan dunking out of the way, I guess to kind of loop it back into Results May Vary, and just that I really do feel like this album is a testament to how to kill your career in 4 years.
Yeah. The fact that this episode is probably going to come out before Todd in the Shadows gets around to a Train Records is a bit surprising.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised he hasn't, but I mean, he's kind of gone on record saying that he's not a fan of this band. So yeah, it makes sense. He could really do a Train Records on, you know, Chocolate Starfish, really, but that didn't kill their relevancy. Results May Vary did, and one part of me would like to say that new metal was on its way out, but you got to remember, Linkin Park put out Meteora that same year, and that also took 3 years to come out. And then Evanescence, they put out Fallen the same year too. And, you know, we're even considering getting Wes Borland to join them after Ben Moody had quit the band too. Like considering Evanescence were following up Fallen after their demo in 2000, it's not like a 3-year gap would have been out of the question necessarily, but I do think that they just took too long, didn't capitalize on new metal's momentum, even if it was winding down by 2002, where, you know, you got some genuine garbage like Trapped. Puddle of Mud's not a new metal band, but throw them in that category, I guess, as well. And just bands that just were not that memorable or that good, or were just copying off of much better bands like Motograter copying off of Slipknot and Mudvayne. It just felt like this album was just going to be dead on arrival no matter who would have put it out when you get into it.
Yeah, like Results May Vary came out closer to the end of 2003, so if you want to say that this album was sort of the end of this era of nu metal, then I think it's more than fair to say that. Even if like some of the other bands like Linkin Park and Evanescence were able to have success years later, at large, I'd say nu metal was definitely on its way out.
Oh, for sure. And one of my things that I like to say about nu metal's decline in popularity is this is where we're gonna kind of just discuss, I guess, the greater influence that Bizkit has on music as a whole. For me, it's them being a gateway band being a huge thing, because I really do genuinely believe if it wasn't for nu metal bands like Korn or Limp Bizkit getting played on Much Music and MTV back in the day, or for a lot of people stuff like Papa Roach and Linkin Park, we wouldn't have gotten into much heavier bands later on. We wouldn't have gotten into bands like Cannibal Corpse or Obituary or Dying Fetus or Decapitated. And, you know, them going on to influence bands like Tetrarch and Wargasm, which, you know, they're starting to get some level of popularity. And this new wave of hardcore bands starting to embrace more of nu metal's side of things, like hardcore bands like Code Orange, Knocked Loose, and Vane.fm, as they now call themselves. You know, bands like that starting to embrace more of the nu metal side of things, and, you know, Poppy integrating that into her sound. Like, nu metal, it's not like it's something that's gone away, and that Bizkit's influence on music was just, you know, a huge flash in the pan part of the late 90s.
Yeah, no. When we say that nu metal was on its way out, we're specifically talking about the genre during its peak, but culturally, heavy metal has borrowed a lot from nu metal. Things like down tuning, bringing more hip hop influences, like all of that stuff has continued. And like you said, the bands that you brought up are still incorporating that in their music today.
Yeah, exactly. And to kind of go in the opposite direction of things in terms of the more, you know, extremer side that we're into, the new wave of American heavy metal is the obvious pick in this case, I would say. In this case, you know, getting bands like Lamb of God, Machine Head going back to more of a groove metal style while implementing more of the melodic death metal side of things on Through the Ashes of Empires. Bands like Killswitch Engage, Shadows Fall, God Forbid, Unearth getting popular around this time period. And, you know, Headbangers Ball coming back. And I do think that bands that were lumped into the nu metal category, I would say unfairly, like Slipknot and System of a Down, adopting more traditional metal elements, or just, you know, going more eclectic in the case of System of a Down. You know, it's very clear that nu metal, aside from just influencing like current waves of bands, it very obviously influenced people to be like, okay, how can we take more traditional metal, bring that back, but kind of modernize it at the same time? Like, you know, down tuning's always just been a thing, going back to Metallica with The Thing That Should Not Be, or Sad But True, or just death metal bands in general, hardcore bands, throw that into the mix.
Oh yeah.
You know, and I do think that Bizkit, they could very well have adopted, I wouldn't say a more traditional metal style. I don't think you'll be able to take the rap metal part out of Limp Bizkit's sound, but I do think them committing to more of a rap metal direction I do think it could have benefited them maybe and made them stand out. I mean, you had bands like E-Town Concrete that were around. You had Head PE, which was still a thing. You could have had Bizkit at least attempt to do so. But for me at this point, and this is where I guess, Mike, this is where we're going to kind of do our Where Are They Now segment. Gold Cobra and Still Sucks. We're not doing episodes on that because there's not much to really say about either of them.
Yeah, I had just recently listened to them, and like the most I can say are they're Limp Bizkit records. Like they do have a bit more modern production to them.
They have a bit more modern influences, like letting Wes do guitar solos, and you know, in Still Sucks case, having a lot of like more ballady type bits here and there, some trappier stuff that's like on dad vibes, I guess. But like, yeah, your mileage is going to vary with Gold Cobra and Still Sucks. Like, yeah, we could talk about how much of a joke it was that Stampede of the Disco Elephants was a title, and you know, them signing to fucking Lil Wayne's record label. But no, like that's the thing about those albums, is that they're Limp Bizkit albums. You know what you're gonna get yourself into. If you already love them, you're gonna eat these up. If you already don't like them, nothing anybody will say will make you change your mind. We just wanted to cover the band from their inception to their height of their popularity to their decline. And I guess to kind of conclude this series on as much of a high note, I'm glad I got into heavy music because of nu metal, but I'm also kind of happy that I went on to discover heavier bands because of it.
I agree. I owe a debt of gratitude to bands like Limp Bizkit that sort of acted as the gateway to the heavier side of metal. But for this album in particular, I think it's best that we just move on.
Yeah, exactly. I don't really feel like doing a favorite songs section because it just feels like we're just grasping straws at this thing. So results may vary. You already know the album is what it is. That's all we really have to say about it. And just that we've got loads of amazing music that just came out this year alone. And that's probably what we're going to do for an episode next.
Yeah, because there's a lot of things that came out this year that just because of time and life, we haven't been able to cover, but there's still titles that I just love to share with you guys. But until then, Nick, where can everyone find you online?
Super Saiyan Death Metal God on Instagram. Come shoot me a follow. I post a lot of album covers, movies, stuff I get on Blu-ray, video games occasionally. I mod for Catherine Isabel from Ginger Snaps, of course, on her Twitch channel. She's not streaming at the moment, either because of life or just her actually going back to work because the pandemic's winding down. So yeah, go shoot her a follow if she ever decides to stream again, and go give some subs and go sub to her because she's awesome and she's super cool. So yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
And you guys can find me on Twitter and Hive and any other social media at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/Coach K42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and Twitter at Ren Pop Culture. We're also on YouTube, on Podchaser, on the Banana Meter. Listen to all of our podcasts on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. Need an escape? So do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Jukebox. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.